We visited the World Press Photo Exhibition this year and found it was a great way to step outside of our bubble. This eye-opening event highlights the news stories around the world that you might not necessarily know about. We arrived on a warm spring morning at the State Library of New South Wales, which overlooks the Royal Botanical Gardens. We looked up at the pillars of the grand entrance, and suddenly we were transported back to our time in Europe, exploring Renaissance architecture draped in layers of ornamental detail. We anticipated the beautifully crafted interior that awaited us. As we walked in, we felt like we were taken back to the 1800s, where spices and steam trains dominated the sense of smell. Buildings were sacred places to help develop the mind, and learning was a passion and something that you followed with one's heart. This followed through with great care and dedication as architects considered how space was linked to many sacred geometric ideals and how it could influence the ambience, lighting, and acoustics. You felt special being in such places, and that resonated in what you did. This idyllic view of learning was a privilege for the rich at the time though, and we mustn't forget the importance of making learning accessible for everyone. As the world progressed through into the 20th century, people created more logical and pragmatic approaches to learning. Nations wanted to make learning a package that could be implemented across multiple minds to help with making things for wars. As the wars passed though, our education system did not change. It did not account for the different needs and values and backgrounds of those individuals who passed through it. People are like plants, we all grow differently, requiring different amounts of light and water, while some like being in the cold and others like being in the heat. So we question, why do our school systems still treat every child as though they are the same plant and unknowingly shame them for growing at different rates to others? Sometimes we can be forced to learn and do things that our hearts and minds may not connect or agree with. We're then measured and tested against different milestones of education to see if we can pass and move into the next level. Imagine for a moment if we tried to teach a dolphin to move on land and their progression in life more or less depended on whether or not it could pass the 50-meter walking exam. Essentially, this is what we do with our children's minds. Those who control these systems and educational milestones seem too focused on implementing regulations rather than allowing young minds to flourish into the unique plants that they are. Our architectural and environmental surroundings, as well as our social and cultural networks, hugely impacts our development individually and as a community, like if you've grown up in a bad neighborhood versus a good one. More boldly, these factors not only influence but determine how we are perceived by and included in society. How does our current approach to architecture, education, culture, and community development set humanity up for the future? As we walked into the grand library hall, we were overcome with a majestic ambience that lifted us up high into the heavens of endless possibilities. We felt inspired and open to seek information in a beautiful, inviting space such as this. There were books as far as the eye could see and people studying at every table. The hall was detailed to an architect's delight, with stained glass windows and a ceiling painted with golden stars. As we explored the building, we slowly made our way upstairs into the World Press Photo Exhibition, taking in all that it had to offer. War. Let's start off with this first photo. This is a photo of an 18-year-old boy laying on a hospital bed after he was badly burned in a conflict between Syria and Turkey in October 2019. His girlfriend was unable to enter the room at first as she was too horrified to confront his injuries. However, the nurses encouraged her to go in and hold his hand. This powerful photo summarizes the hundreds of years of wars that have raged amongst humans since the beginning of intelligence inception. The pain in this room is felt amongst both of them in different ways. We have created artificial borders that are then used to justify killing each other because we don't like one group controlling an area of land that is too close to another. Humanity has brought this seemingly endless suffering on itself, and we continue to do so despite the ever-increasing exposure we have to information and news highlighting its devastating consequences. No amount of compassion for innocent victims and their loved ones has been able to put an end to this inexhaustible cycle of destruction we impose on our own human race. Fleeing. This next group of photos tells us the story of what has been happening in Venezuela over the past 4 years. Political corruption has caused the entire country to go into hyperinflation, which essentially wiped out any value from their currency. Imagine that you had £10,000 in your savings account, and over the course of a year, that money wasn't enough to buy a loaf of bread. Over 4.5 million Venezuelans left the country to find refuge in neighboring Colombia. In this photo, people follow a path through swampland and the jungle region to enter Colombia illegally. Now they are stuck in Colombia with no access to healthcare, education, or legal employment. Imagine fleeing the UK and being stuck in France, where you're not allowed to earn money to feed yourself or your family. This story really highlights how fragile our system is and how greed, regulation, and border control trumps compassion. We have become complacent with our own bubble and permitting so many people to suffer as long as it doesn't break the rules or affect us. I love this skit by College Humor, I'm So Broke. War and power. This third photo really hits home for me. IDX is one of the largest international defense exhibitions in the world. This is a market fair for selling weapons which attracts more than 105,000 attendees every year. Defense ministers, chiefs of staff, as well as Army, Navy, and Air Force commanders use this market to explore the latest weapons while being exposed to the artificial war environment staged with mannequins showing off the most powerful weaponry and advancements. We are clearly more obsessed with making money than finding peace with our fellow humans. I question, at what point do we come to our senses and stop all of this? This is a deeply disturbing reality where war is profited from, promoted, and glorified instead of prevented. Damaged minds. These groups of photos tell the story of sons caught in the midst of chaos during the Iraq invasion of ISIS. Rizan, the 11-year-old boy on the left, was captured in 2014 and freed 5 years later. This photo for me symbolizes the emotional and physical suffering of being taken away from your loved ones at an early age. The top right photo shows Kank, who was also kidnapped in 2014. The photo really speaks volumes about the fractured minds of these children once they go through war. Their reality seemingly half in the past and half in the present. I myself fled Iraq in the mid-1980s. At the age of 3, I was shown how the power and evil of war can leave deep mental scars. My fears of anything, even small things, like failing something simple in maths class, were heightened to the fear of death. Without help and compassion, it can be an uphill struggle to find oneself again. Corruption. I'd like to focus on the photo on the far left. We see an injured man being taken away in a taxi. For a couple of years now, Iraq has been at odds with political corruption. Protests directed at the government's failure to deal with unemployment and provide public services came to a boiling point during these protests. The government forces acted with exceptional vigor, firing live rounds on the protesters. In hindsight, getting rid of a tyrant to bring democracy was like opening Pandora's box, encouraging greed over billions of US dollars from oil money that were never spent into rebuilding Iraq, but squandered into building lavish lifestyles for the few. What a familiar story we see here, taking billions and using it for one's own selfish needs. I've read about this oh so many times. Human borders. I love this photo. A beautiful juxtaposition of nature versus man. This wall is between US and Mexico, but because of it, many animals that use the region will be affected by it. This artificial wall between countries was drawn up in the 1800s. How many people have been affected by borders? And what kind of message are we spreading by dividing things up instead of learning to cooperate? What purpose do they serve in a world where most other species are free to roam? I loved watching the Border series by Vox, where Johnny Harris and Christina Thornell explore the stories behind the lines on a map. Greed. This photo really brings the connection between human baby and animal baby. The innocence of the orangutan's face is like the one you see when a baby smiles at you. I question, why is their life so different to that of ours? Orangutans live on just 2 islands in the whole world, Sumatra and Borneo, and yet we have chosen to take their homes, palm trees, to extract palm oil so that we can enjoy it in our food. This photo really highlights the level of ignorance we have employed upon ourselves. At moments in life, I try to analyze how the human mind embodies these candid emotions of food that allow ourselves to carry on with things that carry so little significance for ourselves, but so much for others. Greed and ignorance. Here we see a fisherman hiding his boat illegally on Lake Victoria as he prepares to work. This photo expresses a mixture of different messages. We are transfixed by what the man is doing and why he is prepared to work illegally. Does he have family to feed? Maybe there isn't much work outside of fishing illegally. Or are the corrupt governments and companies just taking as much as they can while causing serious issues such as pollution, harvesting of resources, and land clearance around the banks? So why is it illegal for him to fish? He's essentially taking immature fish before they can breed, because he can't afford nets or larger boats that can take him beyond the worst pollution around the banks near the shorelines, the same pollution caused by the very same governments and companies. Now it slowly starts to paint a picture of how greed is involved in all of this. All we want is to become rich, and so taking away from poor people trying to feed themselves starts to become okay, as it allows us to have the finer things in life. All this want to be rich obsession that we're being sold is nothing more than justification of corporate greed. They want us to be okay with what they're doing, so we can have this picture of happiness, but only if we follow corporate greed. As children, we are sold this image of what life needs to be for us to attain happiness through movies, TV shows, newspapers, teachers, and companies. But it's merely one vision that might not necessarily fit everyone. Dealing with trauma. Here we are looking at bipolar images. The one of an Armenian girl who has given up on life as she goes into a semi-coma through psychological trauma called resignation syndrome, or RS, because of a lengthy asylum process. While the second image is a powerful one of never giving up. Musa Motha was a rising football player when, at the age of 11, he had his leg amputated as a result of cancer. He now uses his crutches to perform beautiful dance moves and performs with the Volunya Dance Theatre in South Africa. Poetry, not war. I saved this photo to the end as it has such a powerful story behind it. Protests began in Sudan back in 2018 when people were demanding an end to the 30 years of dictatorship of Omar al-Bashir. The government tried to control the situation by using blackouts and shutting down the internet, but the people endured and communicated through text messages, word of mouth, and megaphones. We can see the boy is gripped by his words, and he puts his hand on his heart as he is reciting protest poetry during a blackout night in June. He is using his words to express emotion and connect a nation of people together. We should never forget the power of words. We should never forget the responsibility we have to making sure we use them wisely. We should also never forget to keep our eyes and ears open to the different ways of thinking or thoughts, because they may be the ones that change the world for the better. Be compassionate to difference and learn to cater to expression.